Well, joining me now in studio is Richard Butler. He was the UN's Chief Arms Inspector in Iraq from 1997 to 1999. Sir, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Everything we've heard today, Chilcot report comes out, Tony Blair launches a strong defense. Has this just confirmed that the invasion by the United States and its allies, particularly the United Kingdom, was wrong? It shouldn't have happened.
Yes, it has. We've known for a long time that the reasons for doing this were false. The motives for it were mixed, to say the very least. And the Chilcot report is remarkable for the studied way in which it's picked its way carefully through the relevant data, but comes irretrievably to the conclusion that this was wrong, it should never have happened in the way that it did, and the outcomes of it have been appalling.
He did once, Saddam Hussein, have weapons of mass destruction. Are we absolutely clear that at the time of the invasion he did not have them?
Yes, I think we are, Imran. We had reported to the UN Security Council in my last report to the Council that we had destroyed, removed or rendered harmless, those were the words in the enabling resolution, his weapons of mass destruction, with a few ambiguities with regard to a small number of chemical shells and a couple of missile engines. 3 years later, my successor in the new organisation, Hans Blix, did exactly the same on the eve of the invasion. And I think that's what Chilcot meant when he said this was military action should not have been a last resort. We should have given the allies, so-called allies, should have given a better and further chance to more disarmament work to verify what we now know to be true, that there were no weapons of mass destruction.
In those shades of grey, can it be possible that they were perhaps a little hopeful and that they just sort of focused on the evidence that seemed to make sense and ignored the rest of it? Was there enough in there for them to make a decision to go to war?
I don't believe so, and I don't think Chilcot did either. If you read carefully what he said in his statement today, I haven't, of course, read the whole 2.5 million words report, but if you listen carefully to what he said today, the answer to your question is no. What are these shades of grey? It's perfectly clear that the intelligence information made available to the government was manipulated.
Because you say this now, but I've got your testimony to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in 2002, where I've read this over and over again, and it seems quite clear, with you as an expert, that you seem to be suggesting to them that this guy's dangerous and he probably has those weapons of mass destruction.
No, there were two questions at issue. One is the extent to which Saddam was in compliance with Security Council resolutions and allow us to finally verify that he had no WMD.
I've got this here. I can add it to you so I don't misquote you. Right, there you go.
Sure.
I've got my own copy, you've got yours. So I've highlighted a bit, right? So we've got July 31st, 2002. So the first paragraph I've got here. It is essential to recognize that the claim made by Saddam's representatives that Iraq has no WMD is false. Everyone concerned, from Iraq's neighbors to the UN Security Council and the Secretary General of the UN, with whom Iraq is currently negotiating on the issue, is being lied to. So you're saying they're being lied to by Saddam Hussein, right? And on the final page, final little bit I've got here, on the elemental question of whether, contrary to assertions authorized by him, Saddam possesses WMD, I would refer to the traditional test of whether or not a person can be judged to have committed a crime. Did the accused have the motive, means, and opportunity? Saddam plainly has had and continues to have all three. So they're relying on you and the experts to build a case. For me, you're leaving little doubt. You're hardly being cautious. They're going, Richard Butler's telling us this guy's got the goods and we've got to go after them. Am I reading this wrong?
No, I don't think you are. The distinction I was trying to draw a moment ago is between whether or not the weapons existed and our ability to verify their presence or absence. Saddam, as I reported in the last instance to the Security Council, and it would appear also to the Senate here, had never allowed us to do the latter, all right? He sought to avoid providing the information that we needed to verify the absence of WMD. Now, whether or not he still had them, I'm saying there that I believe that he did. in answer to the questions that are covered now
Right.
by the Chilcot inquiry, I think we now know that he did not, and that's why they didn't find them.
But do you, in retrospect, regret that perhaps you were a bit bullish on that?
Possibly. I'd have to go back and look at the context.
Tony Blair's been speaking. He says the intelligence was not falsified and the decision was made in good faith. His words exactly. Do you believe him?
I believe what he says about himself and his good faith. I've just, before coming to you now here on the set, I've just watched extensively his statement in London, and he repeatedly says, trust me, I'm an honest man. I did what I did with the best of intentions. I'm not going to comment on that other than to say I believe he believes that of himself. What needs to be judged instead of intentions is what the reality was, and I think it is demonstrable that the intelligence information was manipulated. Chilcot makes that perfectly plain. It is demonstrable that Tony Blair wanted to join the United States in an invasion of Iraq, planned months before the invasion actually took place. It is also demonstrable that the effects of that invasion have been a disaster. Need I go on? I think what is at issue here is a fairly hallowed principle that whatever you do, you should do for the right reasons. And I think there's an absence of right reasons here, notwithstanding the faith that Blair says he has in himself and his own judgment.
And going back finally to your own personal role, do you regret that perhaps they used your testimony as an enabling factor to go to war? Because there wasn't enough in there that said, be careful, be cautious, we don't know.
I agree with the last thing you've said. I don't know the use to which they put this. I'll go away and read this again and think about it. I don't know the use to which they put it. I do know the use to which they put intelligence information that was provided to them in good faith, which Chilcot refers to, senior intelligence people expressing concerns to Blair and his government about the uses to which they would put this intelligence. And I know that their good faith was abused and that intelligence was distorted. The death of David Kelly, for example, who was my senior biologist, demonstrates that when he was exposed as the person who said to a representative of the media that they had asked him, and these were his words, to sex up the dossier to make it easier to stage an invasion. He was found dead a few days later. He was so distressed by what had happened, a wonderful man. Now, in the wider scheme of things, that was small beer in comparison with what then happened in Iraq. But I mention it because I think it's an example of the pressures that there were upon experts and intelligence officials to come up with a justification.
Did you feel under pressure?
Oh yes, I felt a lot of pressure, and I resisted a lot of it. I sometimes joke that I'm sure the CIA has got a fat file on me because, you know, they ask me to take into account certain considerations frequently, and I refused to because my job was to try and find the facts about the weapons, not to do other things. Yes, I felt the pressure. I think many, many people did. Obviously, Tony Blair did too. Why he thought it was so important to promise George Bush that he would never let him down, that he would, what were his words, he would follow him wherever, is something that I think the British people should think about.
Yeah, he said he would be with him, whatever, and that was in 2002.
But how extraordinary!
Yes,
to pledge your government's foreign policy on a permanent basis to the service of another, and look at where it's got us.
So it's been fascinating talking to you, Ambassador Richard Butler. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.